Welcome to Real Herbalism Radio, show 140. Today's show is brought to you by Get Healthy Now with Candace.
Get Healthy Now with Candace. Candace is accepting new clients who want to transform their lives naturally, especially with plant-based remedies. To find out more, look at gethealthynowwithcandace.com.
And Hunter Creation, graphic design and website designers that can help you get your marketing ideas into reality. And they can also help you with the new GDRP standards. Contact them at huntercreation.com.
Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting is open for business. I am a certified clinical herbalist who started practice in 2006. I offer in-home and distance consultations, custom formulations, holistic care in conjunction with an existing diagnosis and medication.
Ace High Heat Graphics. If you want custom and printed jerseys, t-shirts, hats, any kind of apparel, contact them. They can help you get your message on your shirts. Contact them at acehighheatgraphics.com. And the Herbal Nerd Society.
The Herbal Nerd Society is an amazing, cool, awesome society.
Yep.
Herbal Nerd.
It is. That is exactly what it is. And it is also an exclusive membership in which you can partake in the Practical Herbalist website and see some of, if you've been on our website, you notice that some of those articles are not open for everybody. Most of them are open for everybody, but some of them are much more complex. And if people are very interested in herbs, then we give you the month. Every month, we're focusing on one herb and really getting very in depth on it. So it's more like a school on herbs.
It is. It's a growing body of content, too.
Yes. Yeah. You get a lot, since there's a new article every single week. There's also a Let's Talk series that we have featured interviews, real short featured interviews with some of the guests that you've heard on our podcast already. And we also have all of the podcasts that we've ever done are available.
All the old podcasts are right at your fingertips if you're an herbal nerd.
That's right. Yeah. So there's a lot of information out there. And all we're asking is $5 a month. And if you decide to pay for it all in 1 year, like you're ready to make that plunge, then that's $50, I believe.
Right. You get 2 months for free, essentially.
Yes. Yep. So it's hardly a big investment, but boy, you sure get a lot of bang for your buck. And this is how we support Real Herbalism Radio and the Practical Herbalist website.
And you get to view the Practical Herbalist ad-free.
Oh, that's right. And ad-free, yes.
There you go. Right. And finally, Occupy Medical.
Occupy Medical is a free street reach integrated health clinic that operates out of Eugene, Oregon. We are a 501c3 and our operating motto is healthcare is a human right. You can reach us at occupy-medical.org. Oh, and I should say, I forgot to say this, the Sierra Lupe Herbal Consulting, just send me a message at sue@thepracticalherbalist.org or .com. You should do that. That's what you should do.
And with that, on with the show. Grief and trauma are a natural and truly healthy part of the human experience, but not so much when they get stuck in our lives or in our bodies. As herbalists, we are often called on to help the grieving process to move forward naturally to help heal body, mind, and spirit. Today we're talking with Ashley Litecky-Ellenbas, registered herbalist, yoga teacher, and owner of Sky House Yoga about natural approaches to grief and protection. Now here are your hosts, Candace Hunter and Sue Sierra Lupe.
I'm Candace Hunter.
And I'm Sue Sierra Lupe. And welcome to Real Herbalism Radio.
Welcome, Ashley. I'm so glad you came back to visit with us.
Yes. We enjoyed our conversation last time, and we're delighted to have you return.
Thank you for having me.
So I was thinking about last fall in 2017, my grandmother passed on, and she was a centurion. She was very important to me, and she was an important part of my life. And I took some of what you talked about at the American Herbalist Guild Symposium in the fall, and I used some of that, and I used the many other techniques I have for myself for moving through grief. But I also noticed around that same time, other people were having grieving problems, things where they were struggling with it. And it got me thinking about how important it is for us as herbalists to know how to help people who are moving through grief, whether it's fresh and raw and the incident just happened, or whether it happened years ago and now it's time to face it. And it made me think, I've got to call Ashley.
Help me, Ashley. You're my only hope.
You're so right that I think so many people are dealing with grief right now on a personal level. And also I think collectively there's a lot of grief for what's happening to our environment and our country in some ways. So I think it's a topic that a lot of people are interested in, and on a lot of levels, people can really be benefited by. And there's so many plants that can help facilitate the healing process. So I'm really happy to be here today to talk about this with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
One of the first things, of course, acknowledging that you have grief. You're in a position where you can talk to people, and I understand when people are coming in, because we talked a little before the show, when they come in to get help from you, grief is not the first thing on their list, but is sometimes the first thing that really needs to get taken, put onto their list for stuff to deal with. How do you come upon that conversation?
Sure. It's not always easy, and doesn't always happen in the first conversation, but I do like to open my initial consultations with some questions about a person's childhood. Tell me about what were you like as a child? What was your health like as a child? And kind of have them walk me through their early life experiences. And that can kind of give me a sense of what they've been through, what they've experienced, and how, what is the story that they're telling about it? Because, they're going to tell me certain things and not other things. So kind of listening to what and how they tell their story, it gives me a lot of information in terms of where I can go and how I might be able to help. And, not all clients will go there. And so I have to be respectful of that as well.
Yeah. So, do you have people that are looking for things that sound like, that give you indicators that it might be grief oriented, or are there clues to you that you may want to venture into that field?
Yeah, I think there's, one thing that I look for is how are they breathing? So as telling their story, as they're talking, I'm kind of watching their breath, and, is it like a kind of a labored short breath? Can I see the tension in their upper body? Or are they taking big, deep belly breaths? And, they seem very relaxed as they're telling their stories. That can be one indication. I also look for just issues with the lungs. In traditional Chinese medicine, the lungs are the storehouse of grief. So if there's been, recurrent asthma or pneumonia, bronchitis, issues in the lungs, not always is it associated with grief, but it can sometimes be related to grief and how someone is letting go of things, even as simple as, you lost your favorite sweatshirt when you were 10 and you can't let it go. There's incidents in people's lives that they remember, they hold on to. And even if it might not be something as overt as losing a family member early on, people can hold on to those traumas and not be able to truly let them go. So I look for it in their breath. And I also kind of try to listen to how they're telling the story as much as what they're telling.
Mm-hmm. I've talked to a couple of Reiki practitioners, and some of them have repeated this idea that they're just quiet with the patient for a while. And, they're not even touching them. They're just skimming over them. And that in that quiet time, they notice that people will just start crying, or their mind, because they have to be quiet during that time, they kind of go internal, and the things that come up for them are oftentimes stories of grief. Do you find that with your yoga practices too?
Yeah, and I think that's a great insight from that practitioner, because it is in the silence that the grief can start to arise. And I do think that, a question that I often ask is, how, where do you feel this in your body is a question I ask. And, that sometimes will trigger some emotions or some connection back to how they're actually housing that pain or discomfort. And sometimes when I'm also taking their pulses, that's a very quiet place between the practitioner and the client. And so as I'm physically touching them and getting a read of their pulses and their deeper energies, sometimes I can start to feel them tense up, and sometimes tears will start to come out, and I just ask, tell me what the tears are about.
Yeah.
And then that gives them permission to tap into, okay, here's why I'm crying. And then more can come through that way as well.
So what are some of the ways that the plants, I guess, that you reach for when grief is coming up for folks?
So I love elder. Elder is one of my favorite herbs for grief and for trauma, and also for protection, for people that have experienced trauma and are afraid of, recurring trauma. Elder is a lot of us know about this herb as a wonderful immune booster, but it's also been shown in a number of, laboratory studies to have a really strong protective effect against different bacteria and viruses, and specifically those that attach to the lung mucosa. So, if we think about the lungs and being the storehouse of grief, and here we have an herb that really specifically targets the protection of the lung tissue, I really see this as not a mistake. Also, the elder plant has these beautiful hollow branches, and I think of those like the airways of the lungs, and even the clusters of flowers look like the bronchioles themselves. So there's a lot of doctrine of signature connections there. And I really think of elder as making a connection between heaven and earth, and what's above and what's below. And, sometimes things that are deep in our subconscious or things we've had to suppress, we don't necessarily always need to mentally process them to move them out. And I feel like elder warms the body, it increases circulation, it increases respiration. And so it can help people to take deeper breaths, and to move energy and to move stagnation, so that things can pass through without necessarily having to re-experience the trauma again.
So are you talking about elderflower or elderberry, or both?
I use both, but the elderflower is one that I use for trauma more often. Elderberry, I like that one when there's actual infection, like there's, an actual virus, or there's some sort of bacterial infection. But for more of the energetics and that stimulating of air in the body and of movement in the body, I really like the flowers.
Nice. So that's, when I've noticed with acupuncture that I had this idea at one point that you always had to know what it was that you were processing. And there was a point in acupuncture where I realized I don't have to know what it is. I just have to cry it out, essentially, just let it go. And for me, a lot of times that ends up being crying, which, it's kind of embarrassing in the middle of
It's what you're good at.
It's in the middle of community acupuncture and I'm weeping, but, whatever.
My philosophy is better out than in. So,
yes.
how it move out.
That is so true. Yes. And I love the idea of, elder has a long tradition of being like the gateway between the worlds, and, it's on the fairy mounds and all of that. So I love the idea that, if you want to just let the grief go, you can really just ask elder to take care of that for you.
Mm-hmm. Let it process it through it, and allow it just to pass along. So it's, And then in terms of protecting you from future trauma, it was used, it was actually required. I think I mentioned this in the AHG talk, but, Charlemagne, when he took over France, actually required all French households to have an elder tree on their property. Firstly, because it protects the house and the land from lightning strikes. And secondly, because it has all the medicine that you need. And this idea of it being protective against lightning is, in astrology, the planet Uranus is associated with unforeseen, unpredictable shocks, like lightning strikes in our lives. And so, elder also is used as a protectant against these sorts of unseen and unpredictable changes and traumas. So I think it builds resiliency in our nervous systems, our immune systems, and also I think on a more psychic level, it can protect us from those sorts of traumatic events.
Yeah, that is a beautiful thing too, because I got to say, I tried a few times through the years to get elder to grow and failed miserably. And then I went through what I called what we call that, the housing crisis in 2016. At that point, our landlord just called and said, you got 60 days to move or get out. And it was,
They're selling it.
yeah. And it, on the surface, that sounds so lightweight, but we're self-employed. And, I could spend an hour talking about it. It was a crisis. It was traumatic. Yes. And it came out of the blue for us. It was like a lightning strike. Mm-hmm. And after the sale was complete, I had the opportunity to purchase an elder. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to put it in. It'll be my first plant in my own place.
The house the house that they tried to sell out from underneath you.
Exactly. The house I've been living in 8 years. The first plant in my own place that I'm actually planting.
Nice.
And it's still alive.
Yeah.
It's managed to survive my care, which is pretty hard. Plants have to be hardy to survive my care. So
do you pair elder with anything, or you use that singly?
When I'm working more with energetic signatures, I usually just use them on their own. And part of that is just because I want my clients to form a relationship with that one plant. So, I want them to experience elder as the elder mare, as it's called in German, the elder mother, or, as this individual spirit that's going to be partnering with them. So, but if it's more like, for bronchitis or something like that, I'll often pair it with other herbs that have similar actions that I'm trying to address.
Mm-hmm. Have you used lavender with it before?
I haven't specifically, but that sounds really lovely. Is that something that you use?
Yes, I guess it is. Yeah. It's such a really nice essential oil to use for people that are in shock or they have PTSD from grief or attacks or different things like that. It's traumas. Yeah. Yeah. It's a pretty nice herb to use, I have found, but it's not for everybody, especially if you're allergic to it.
Yeah.
Then you should not use that.
If you're allergic, avoid it.
Yeah.
So what's another one that you find that really comes up often or is really helpful for grief?
Another herb that I use is rue.
Rue.
But I really love this plant, and I find that it is really, it's a low dose herb. So you don't, you're not going to be brewing a big old batch of tea or taking like, a few mils of your tincture. But in low doses, I really think this herb has an amazing capacity to unhook. You could call them negative energies or, in the spirit world in ancient Greece, they called them daimons. But, sometimes grief is an attachment that we have to an experience that, as the Greeks would see it, that the experience sometimes even has a life of its own. So it's almost like we get these experiences that get hooked to us and we can't let them go. And so it's beyond just the attachment to, this process of letting go of someone we love, but of this sort of psychic hook of the experience itself that we can't release. And so I find that rue, it's an anti-parasitic herb, it's a vemrifuge. So I find that this one I really like to use in single drop doses for grief that, it's really, the person knows they've processed it, they know that they should be able to move on, but there's almost like a psychic hook that's not letting them go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this could be from the other world. This could be a hook actually from a spirit itself. And I find that rue kind of helps to unhook those psychic barbs so that the person can process the grief in a way that is more natural, or that that they're not as emotionally charged from the processing itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've noticed with patients that I worked with that are really suffering from grief for a variety of different reasons, compiled stuff, that they are, one of the indicators to me is they're hoarders. So they're showing their grief by their hoarding, and they'll have stories about every single thing that they've hoarded. And, it's not always because of my mom or because of my dad or what have you, but it's like they're holding on to that past that is gone with a physical way, just to keep their fingers on something that a time that made them happy, or a time that was so distraught that they just need to hold on to it until they could figure out how to turn it into something helpful for them.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, so something like rue, and even growing rue around the house, or just there's different ways of using rue other than just having to take it internally. So smudging with rue, or I just like to have bundles of it around my house too, and it just really works to help clear spaces.
The Journal of Functional Herbalism is a free online journal promoting the integration of traditional Western herbalism, clinical nutrition, and functional medicine. It's published by the Eclectic School of Herbal Medicine, and you can find the Journal of Functional Herbalism at functionalherbalism.com.
Another herb that that when you said some of the clients you work with that they have like kind of compounded traumas, made me think about ghost pipe. Have you guys used that plant?
We have it growing around here. Yeah, I haven't used it for grief.
So it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast, which is one thing that I do love to do.
Oh, good.
And I love listening to yours, and a number of other ones out there. It's a really fun way to continue staying up on your herb studies. But Sean Donahue was giving a really interesting talk on ghost pipe. Or actually, I forget what it is even on, but ghost pipe came up, and he said it's, a lot of people use it for pain because it's a really good pain reliever. But he was saying that it's actually also really, really helpful when people have been abused, or there's trauma that is compounded, and that the most recent trauma is triggering all of the past traumas. And so it's not even like they're processing the current trauma that has happened, but they're so overwhelmed by all that it's brought up for them.
It sounds like it's almost like a net-like effect.
Yeah, and so if you think about, the way that ghost pipe is sort of looks like almost like it has its own, grows almost like a mushroom, and it has this connection to the mycelial network of the earth. Mm-hmm. And so Sean talks about how it kind of like retrains the neural network and our perception of pain and trauma.
Yeah. Yeah, there's that connection to the mycelial network. There's your net right there.
Yeah.
I mean,
and it's in the blueberry family, and blueberries are very connected too. So I guess that's just part of their family. Mm-hmm. They're really connected men. But so are you using tincture or?
I'm using tincture in low dose, usually like 3 to 10 drops, something like this.
Oh, whoa. Yeah. On a like daily or a couple times a day, or?
Just once a day. If there's physical pain that's coming up with it, I'll go more on the higher dosage. But if it's really more of like deep grief and like just deep, overwhelming emotional pain, that's just almost like a depression, then using about 3 drops or so can just sort of help to clear the current pain and also kind of work into the past pains and just sort of help to loosen the grip of those on a person as well.
Wow. That's
it's an amazing plant.
Is there like do you only use it for a certain amount of time, or because I wonder about it being a low dose. Sometimes people will use low doses for just a few months, or just as per whatever the need is of the patient.
Yeah, with a lot of the more spirit-based herbs, I usually say take it until you feel like you don't need it anymore.
That makes sense.
Feel like,
okay.
When you feel like your things have resolved, or you feel like you've gotten the support that you needed from the plant, then just, and most people very naturally, kind of organically will stop using an herb. They'll get just sort of, forget about it. They'll use it religiously for like a month, and then, slowly they'll just use it less and less until it's not needed anymore. But then they always have that memory in their back pocket that they can come back to if they need it again.
Nice.
Wow. It's pretty impressive. I wouldn't have pulled the ghost pipe out That's that. I got it. Now I got to go jump into that plant and find out about it.
Yeah.
And I have seen it growing on the trail here in Oregon multiple times and just simply admired it. So now my admiration needs to go a little deeper. Is there another plant that you like using that you have in your grief protocol, or maybe yoga position that you like using?
Yeah, there's a really great heart breath exercise that I like to use. And, this is for people, this wouldn't be for someone who's like in acute stages of grief. Can be a little bit too intense for them. But for someone who is, maybe it's like deeper grief that they can't quite access, but they want to get to it. The heart breath technique is really powerful, and you basically lie on your back and you find support. So maybe a pillow under your knees and, a pillow over your head, or not over your head.
Yeah, that's a different one. Yeah.
That's a whole different one.
That's not going to be comfortable. But just finding a really comfortable, relaxed position. And then you relax your jaw and you breathe in and out through your mouth.
Oh, wow.
And it's intense, so, I often do this. I've done this with clients in sessions before where I can really kind of help guide them. But, doing this for, about maybe 5 to 7 minutes of just inhaling. And you imagine as you inhale it through the mouth, you're bringing the breath into the heart. Mm-hmm. And as you exhale, you're bringing the breath from the heart and back out through the mouth, so that it's this sort of giving and receiving of the breath or the prana or the life force with the heart energy in the lungs. And you just keep going back and forth. And it really does. I mean, it really changes. It alters you in a way where, you can start to access things. And most of the time people cry. It brings out tears, especially if they're really repressed tears.
Yeah.
Well, that's
by going in and out of your mouth, you're giving it the opportunity to be digested, because that's the beginning of digestive tract. That's the beginning of how you digest things. And a lot of times that grief that gets stuck is undigested. It's an experience you haven't gone through. You haven't like fully integrated it. You haven't found all the pieces of it that are the important ones, and then let the stuff that isn't important finish going. So by going through the mouth, you're bringing it back up and saying, okay, let's digest this and be done with it. Let's let it go.
Bring it to the mouth, like you're bringing it to a place where you're going to have words for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So with all of that, it seems like people would need some fortification. Is that, I was thinking like they'd be just crying out all their electrolytes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think in the last podcast, we talked about nourishing infusions. So, if I'm going to be doing sort of deep, release work with a client, I'm going to want to make sure that they have deep nervines like oat straw and, maybe some passion flower and skullcap and just other, herbs that are going to be nutritious and deeply supportive, so that they don't overexert and deplete themselves further.
Mm-hmm. And my favorite, nettle. Man, I just like throwing nettle at people. Not when it's fresh, so that it hurts them. Just I don't want that rumor to spread. Sue throws live nettle at people. No, that's not true, folks.
Well, you did that one spring when we were harvesting.
That was just you.
I know.
It was just
but
you.
I'm people.
Well, technically.
It's not debatable. All of my flock says I'm definitely people.
Right, except for Candace. I don't throw nettle at people. But, more metaphorically, this is such a great nutritive herb and it really help you. And, it has all of those wonderful electrolytes in it. So restorative. I can see how it would work with oat straw and passion flower and skullcap. I know it's part of one of your formulas. Throw your secrets out there to the general public.
Well, it seems like, at least, I'm just thinking about nettle. It grows in swampy, it likes, the damper conditions, and damp is often associated with emotional stuff,
Yep.
And it's gently warming. So, a lot of times emotions that stop moving end up getting cold, and, it's like a iceberg.
An iceberg.
Like people who are not emotional are often described as being frosty or
ice queen,
cold-hearted, ice queen, all that. So you warm it up a little bit and you get that energy moving.
Yeah.
So it seems like that could be really nourishing.
Or as they called me, Heart of Stone Sue. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a great point. And I think too, nettles is like, because it has the stingers on it, I think of it also as a good boundary keeper. So not only does it move all of the energy that might be stuck, but then it's also protective in that way of, you can only come close if you know how to handle me.
Yes, exactly.
Right, you're warned. Do you throw warming herbs into that too, or do you think that's almost a little too much for people in deep grief?
I have found that sometimes nettles can be a little stimulating and a little drying. So if I'm really working on nourishing and trying to, calm a person's nervous system, I usually use more like oat straw as my base. And then I will kind of feather in other herbs that are, that are going to be a little bit more, I don't want to say sedative, but more kind of more of our relaxing nervines. I do use some warming ones, like catnip is a really great one for people that tend to bottle up their emotions and then they sort of explode. Whereas chamomile, Matthew talks about it being more for sort of the whiny type, the person that's like constantly complaining about everything that's wrong. So I'll, depending on how a person is holding their emotions, I'll sometimes throw in catnip for that explosive type or bottled up type, or I'll add some chamomile, which is also warming for, that sort of like I'm just gently whining all the time.
Yeah.
Chamomile for whiners. Okay.
Yeah. For the whiny babies in us all.
And catnip for firecrackers.
Exactly. Yeah, you totally got it. So, so, I'm not adverse to using warming herbs when they're needed. And especially if a person is kind of running more on the cold side.
Mm-hmm. I'd never thought of chamomile as being warming. But then this is not my scope. You guys are talking your own language here. I have so much to learn about this whole energetics field, and appreciate you being gentle with me.
So chamomile does have some bitter compounds. So it does have, bitters tend to be more on the cooling side. So a lot of people think, oh, it's bitter, or if it's bitter, it's cooling, or if it's relaxing, it's cooling. But, chamomile also, it's a carminative, so it helps with digestion. So it does have those volatile oils, which tend to be more on the warming side. So it's, in some ways you can think of it as being, cooling to the emotion. And it's also warming for the physiology because of, its effects on digestion. So it's a very common thing to think that, the bitter equals cooling. But I know energetics, there's so many times where I'm like, I swore that was a cooling herb. And then as I really look into it, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But the truth is different traditions actually have different descriptions. So, the Chinese will say one plant's cooling and the Ayurvedic practitioners will say it's warming. So it's kind of, it's a whole big thing.
Yeah, it is a whole big thing. I like Paul Bergner's thing. He says he's got like a specific process of how to taste an herb. And he's like, you should taste every one. And you can tell, how does it make your body feel? Does it warm your body up or does it cool your body off? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that's really practical.
Well, we made up these terms. The plants themselves are not cooling or heating or whatever. We're just putting it into our own language.
Yeah.
That's the human construct.
Right.
So, that's my opinion.
There you go.
It's free for everyone to have.
But what I'm wondering, have you worked with borage at all?
Borage.
As for nourishing or with grief?
I haven't worked with it as a plant. I've worked with the flower essence for courage when there's a sense of deep grief and sadness, and the person just really needs the courage to sort of rise up out of that misfortune. But I haven't used it as an herb before. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? How have you used it?
When I end up using it, I usually use it if I know, for me, it's like that's the warrior herb. So stuff's going to go down. Something's coming. So you just add a little bit of borage to your regular nourishing tea every day. And I don't use tons of it, and I use leaf, and I don't worry about what is that called, the PAs or whatever the
PA.
Yeah. I don't worry about those. I'm just like, this is not necessarily, I'm not going to be using this for years on end.
And you're not using enough of it for it to be a problem.
No. So I add that to my tea. And then if I didn't see it coming, or after it's done and I need to recover, and I have to just that's where you're like pulling yourself back up out of it. Because when you go through traumatic things, or you're dealing with a grief is coming or whatever, when you go through that, sometimes it's hard to find the energy to step out of it and return to regular life. It's kind of like, it's almost as if it's almost as if your life has become the giant shamanic circle and you don't know how to step out of that circle and go back to just normal functioning. So for me, that's where borage is really wonderful for helping that transition. It's got nutritive aspects. And then even in tea form, I find it brings in that energy of, okay, now you're rebuilding and you can move out, and you don't have to move out like a warrior in crisis. You can move out like the returning hero who has something to teach.
Yeah.
So it's helps with that mind shift.
I've used it in heart blends with hawthorn. It's got some magnesium in it. It's vitamin C. That's how you justify it with people that have some cardiovascular issues. But mostly like for people that they noticed that they started having cardiovascular issues right after they had some kind of loss, or they felt disempowered in some way, and it seems to kind of help them get their feet on the ground. And I'm not sure what to credit that for, but it's tasty, so that really helps. And for things that are that deeply nutritive, because they move so quickly on so many different levels, then it seems like it brings people's confidence back. Like they can be healed. Look at this success. I can be healed. I'm not as broken as I thought I was. And that kind of confidence building is something that particularly a lot of new patients really need. So
makes sense. Yeah.
So I love that.
I love that.
Yep. Good herbs.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, and you've certainly given us a lot to think about, and a couple of plants I'm going to have to do some research on.
Yeah.
Look what you've done, Ashley. Look what you've done. And how can people get a hold of you? Do you have?
People can get a hold. Sorry, there was a little delay there.
Sorry.
People can find me on my website, skyhouseyoga.com, and they can also email me at skyhouseyoga@gmail.com. I'm also on social media a lot, so if folks want to see pictures or videos of what I'm up to in medicine making, you can follow me on Instagram at Plants Whisper Yoga. That's all together, and also on Facebook as Ashley Litecky-Ellenbas. So I love interacting with people online. That's how I do a lot of my work. So I hope people can stay connected with me that way.
Well, and if folks want to get together with you in person, you do have an herbal retreat coming up fairly soon, and it's not just going to be you, right?
That's right.
There's going to be not that you aren't worth an entire herbal retreat alone.
It's the magnificence of Ashley plus the magnificence of others.
Yes,
it will be this magnificence bouquet.
I feel like a very small little dandelion among these great teachers of mine. Yeah, I'll be leading a retreat with Matthew Wood and Margie Flint in late summer, early autumn. So I'm really excited. We're going to have a focus on clinical diagnostics. So it'll be wonderful for people who have some background in using herbs and working with them, who want to learn more about facial diagnostic techniques and pulses and tongues, and the specific indications we've been talking a little bit about.
Wow, that sounds great.
That's going to be really fun.
And people will be able to find that on your link to that on your website.
Yep.
When that comes up. Fabulous. So,
and we'll have links in the show notes for folks, so you can get all the dates and all the details.
And please, folks, keep your eye on her website because she also has apprenticeships that come up throughout the year. There's one coming up in fall as well.
Yeah.
So this Ashley person is no slacker when it comes to teaching people in the community. And we are grateful for that. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate your time and your wisdom.
Thank you so much. And it was such a joy being with you. And yeah, borage, I'm totally going to go on a borage quest now. So
May the borage be with you.
Yes.
And also with you.
Thank you so much, ladies.
All right. Take care.
The statements made about herbs and products on this podcast have not been evaluated by the United States Food and Drug Administration, FDA, and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease. All information provided on this podcast or any affiliated websites is for informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for advice from your physician or other healthcare professional. You should not use the information on this podcast and its affiliated websites for a diagnosis or treatment of any health problem. Always consult with a healthcare professional before starting any new vitamins, supplements, diet, or exercise program before taking any medication, or if you have or suspect you might have a health problem. Any testimonials, questions, or case studies are based on individual results and do not constitute a guarantee that you will achieve the same results.